Elena's heart dropped. Did he follow us from the workshop? No, Lorenzo said. He found the restaurant, which means, before he could finish, a soft tapping echoed from the far end of the alley, not footsteps. Something sharper, more deliberate, metal, against concrete, tap, tap, tap. Elena froze. The rhythm was slow, calm, confident, a predator's tempo. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. He's playing with us. A chill ran up her arms. Darian Corvo wasn't approaching. He was announcing himself, claiming the space, claiming the moment, claiming the control he believed he'd never lost. Lorenzo stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between the sound and Elena. His voice dropped so low it barely scraped the air. Elena, when I say run, you run. Fear snapped in her chest. Lorenzo, not with me. He said, away from here, as far as you can. Her breath trembled. I'm not leaving without you. You won't have a choice. The tapping grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. Closer now, then. It stopped. A deep, dangerous quiet filled the alley. Marina whimpered softly, burying her face in Elena's shoulder. Elena kissed the top of her head, fighting the rising panic smothering her lungs. A voice broke the silence, smooth, cold, too calm. I can hear you breathing. Elena felt every muscle in her body lock. Darian's voice drifted through the alley like a fog, soft enough to sound polite, hard enough to feel like a promise of violence. You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be. He continued, words echoing eerily. But I suppose that's human nature. Fear always makes things messy. Lorenzo's fists tightened. Stay behind me. He whispered to Elena. Darian stepped into view at the edge of the alley. Black coat. Immaculate posture. Expression calm as death. His eyes locked onto them, and then onto the shape of the steel box bulging beneath Lorenzo's coat. He smiled. A small, slow, measured smile that didn't reach his eyes. There it is, he said softly. Matteo's final little masterpiece. Lorenzo stepped forward. You're not taking it. Darian tilted his head slightly. You think you have a choice. You won't touch them. Lorenzo growled. Not while I'm here. Darian exhaled a quiet, amused breath. And you think you're enough to stop me? Every word dripped with superiority, with the certainty of a man who had never once failed to claim what he hunted. Elena stepped back, clutching Marina tighter. Darian lifted his hand, not a weapon, a gesture, barely a flick of his wrist. Give me the box, Lorenzo, he murmured, and maybe, I let them walk away. Lorenzo didn't move. Darian clicked his tongue once, a sound of disappointment. Elena, he said, shifting his gaze to her, you look frightened. Elena swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Stay away from us. But why? Darian asked gently, as if the question truly puzzled him. I'm just trying to clean up Matteo's mess. Lorenzo barked a short, cold laugh. Your idea of cleaning leaves bodies in every corner of the city. Darian shrugged. Order requires sacrifice. He took one step forward. Lorenzo blocked him. Darian stopped again, not fearing Lorenzo, simply studying him like an obstacle he had already calculated how to remove. I'll ask one last time, Darian said, voice losing its softness. The box. Lorenzo whispered back to Elena without taking his eyes off the man. When I move, you run. Elena's heart cracked open. Lorenzo, take her, he whispered, and run until your legs give out. Darian stepped closer. Lorenzo exhaled sharply, a breath of finality. Now, he said. Elena didn't think. She turned and sprinted down the alley, clutching Marina against her chest as the wind cut cruelly across her face. Behind her chaos erupted, a grunt, a struggle, the harsh thud of bodies colliding, the clatter of something metal, a shout, Lorenzo's voice, raw and furious. Elena didn't look back. She ran, harder, faster, breath burning, heart exploding, tears blurring the world into streaks of fear and light. Marina sobbed in her arms, whispering her name, whispering Mom, go, go, go. Elena didn't stop, not when her lungs screamed, not when her legs wavered, not when the alley stretched into an endless corridor of shadow and dread. She ran because she knew, because she felt it, because the air itself told her, if she stopped, even for one breath, they would never make it out alive. And as she reached the end of the alley and burst onto the street, heart shattering in her chest, one truth echoed through her soul. The story was only beginning. Elena didn't stop running until her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed behind a dumpster at the edge of a narrow residential street, the cold metal biting into her shoulder as she clung to Marina's trembling body. Her breath came in sharp, jagged bursts. Each inhale scraped her lungs as though the night itself had grown claws. Marina sobbed quietly, face pressed against Elena's collarbone. Elena held her close, rocking her gently, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. I've got you. But inside, her heart was breaking open. Somewhere behind her, somewhere in that alley, Lorenzo was still fighting, still buying them time, still risking everything to protect the daughter of a woman he barely knew because of a brother he couldn't save. The silence that followed the struggle was unbearable. Elena forced herself to stay still. She listened, every heartbeat resting like a tremor against her ribs. No footsteps, no shouts, no breath. Only the low hum of a streetlight flickering in the distance. Her pulse clawed up her throat. She needed to move. She needed to disappear. She needed to get Marina somewhere safe before Darian realized they had escaped. She adjusted Marina in her arms and stood slowly, every muscle screaming in protest. Her knees wobbled, her vision dimmed at the edges, but she pushed forward, forcing her terror into motion. "Mom, where are we going?" Marina whispered. "Somewhere far." Elena murmured, "Somewhere he can't find us." But even as she said it, she felt the lie tremble through the air. Darian Corvo always found what he wanted. Elena slipped down the sidewalk, keeping to the shadows, pressing close to fences and bushes. Each time a car passed, she ducked low, heart hammering hard enough to bruise her ribs. The neighborhood felt too open, too exposed. The shadows felt too thin to hide in. She needed shelter, a place to think, a breath of safety, even 1 minute's worth. Her eyes fell on a small playground across the street, its swings swaying in the wind. Beyond it stood a row of old trees, their branches thick, their roots pushing up from the soil like knuckles from the earth. Behind the trees, an abandoned maintenance shed. Elena didn't hesitate. She crossed the street, every nerve on high alert, and moved toward the shed hidden behind the playground equipment. Its wooden boards were warped, its padlock rusted through. She used her foot to nudge the door open, the hinges groaning softly as if waking from decades of sleep. Inside, darkness swallowed them whole. It smelled of damp soil, rotting leaves, and forgotten tools. But it felt enclosed, hidden, safe enough for a few moments. Elena slid down against the wall, holding Marina tightly. The little girl buried her face into Elena's chest, a quiet whimper escaping her. "Mom, what about the man helping us? What about Lorenzo?" Elena closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. She couldn't lie now, not to her daughter, not to herself. "I don't know," she whispered. The words tasted like ash. Marina's small fingers tightened around her shirt. "Is he hurt?" Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. "Maybe, but we have to trust he's strong, and that he wanted us to run so he could help us." The shed creaked softly around them. Wind pushed through the cracks, bringing with it the cold bite of early morning. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. Time warped itself around fear. Elena kept listening for footsteps, for the strike of Darian's boots, the rustle of his coat. But the world outside was quiet, too quiet. She rubbed Marina's back gently, trying to soothe her trembling. "You're safe, sweetheart. I'm right here." But the truth nagged at her, relentless, sharp, unforgiving. She wasn't safe, not really. Not with the steel box in Lorenzo's coat. Not with Darian stalking the shadows. Not with Matteo's secrets laced into every corner of that cursed restaurant. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Elena stood again. She needed to check. She needed to know if Lorenzo had survived. She needed answers, not hope threaded through darkness. "Stay close to me," she whispered to Marina. She peeked through the shed's broken boards. The street was empty. No figures, no movement. Just dull, washed-out daylight creeping slowly across the asphalt. She stepped outside and made her way carefully back toward the alley, not through the open street, but by slipping behind houses, weaving between fences, staying small in the landscape. Every step tightened her chest. Every shadow felt like it could hide Darian's cold smile. When she reached the mouth of the alley, she froze. The air was heavy, still, thick with the aftertaste of danger. Slowly, she peeked around the corner. Her breath hitched. The alley was torn apart, trash cans overturned, crates smashed, debris scattered in violent disarray. The marks of a brutal struggle etched themselves into the ground like bleeding wounds. But Lorenzo was gone. No body, no blood trail, no sign of him, just absence. An absence that felt loud. Elena felt her knees weaken. She leaned against the wall, fighting the wave of dread that crashed over her. "He's not here," she whispered to herself. "He's not here." Marina tugged her sleeve gently. "Mom, maybe he ran away too." Elena forced a breath in. Maybe. But she wasn't sure. The alley felt wrong, not empty, but wiped clean, as if someone had erased the evidence of a fight too quickly. And that terrified her more than anything else. She turned away from the alley, heart pounding. "Come on," she whispered. "We need to get somewhere safe." But where? Elena's gaze drifted across the street to the quiet laundromat on the corner, its neon sign flickering half-heartedly in the pale morning light. The windows were fogged from steam, the hum of machines droning inside. People, noise, neutral ground. It was better than hiding in the open. She hurried across the street and slipped into the laundromat, the sudden warmth kissing her frozen skin. A few tired strangers were scattered among the machines, folding clothes, staring at phones, paying no attention to her or the frightened child clinging to her arm. Good. Noise drowned danger. Crowds hid fear. Routine smothered suspicion. She leaned close to Marina. "Stay beside me, sweetheart." They sat on a bench in the corner. Elena's mind raced. Where is Lorenzo? Did he escape? Did Darian take him? Is the box gone? Are we next? Questions churned like a storm, relentless and suffocating. Then her phone vibrated. She nearly dropped it in shock. A message, unknown number, no name, just 4 words. "Get to the restaurant. Alone." Elena's blood ran cold. Another message appeared instantly. "Bring the girl and you die." Her pulse slammed violently against her ribs. Marina leaned into her. "Mom," Elena swallowed. Hard. Dread washed over her, the kind that numbs the bones and burns the breath. Who sent the message? Lorenzo, Darian, someone else watching from the shadows. A third message appeared. "Come now, or he dies." Elena's heart cracked open. Lorenzo, they had him. Fear screamed through her veins. Marina grasped her hand, confused and frightened. "Mom, what does it say?" Elena blinked back tears. "Nothing." She whispered, "We just need to do something very careful now." She kissed Marina's forehead, her voice breaking. "I'm going to keep you safe, no matter what." Her phone buzzed again, one final message slicing into her chest like a blade. "We're waiting." And with that, Elena understood with terrifying clarity. The hunt was no longer approaching. It had already arrived, and the story was only beginning. After the final message pulsed on the phone screen, "We're waiting," Elena felt the laundromat around her fall away in a slow, nauseating blur. The hum of the dryers, the murmur of strangers, even the familiar clink of coins falling into machines dissolved beneath the weight of those two words. They didn't just beckon, they threatened, they cornered. And somewhere behind that threat, Lorenzo's life hung by a thread. Elena stared at the screen, her breath trembling. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to read the messages again. Each line tightened around her ribs like a rope pulled cruelly taut. "Mom, what's wrong?" Marina whispered, her small voice trembling. Elena gently tucked the phone against her chest, forcing her breathing to steady. She looked down into her daughter's wide, frightened eyes. For a moment, she saw herself reflected there, scared, desperate, but refusing to collapse. She couldn't bring Marina with her. She couldn't leave her alone. Both options were unbearable, but the message had been clear: bring the girl and you die. They weren't negotiating. They were issuing a command. Elena inhaled sharply. She stood, took Marina's trembling hands in her own, and crouched to her level. "Sweetheart, I need you to listen very carefully." "Okay," Marina sniffled, nodding. "I have to go somewhere for a little while, just a little, but you can't come with me. It isn't safe." Marina's face crumpled. "Mom, no, no, don't leave me." Elena pulled her into a tight embrace, tears burning behind her eyes. "I don't want to. I would never choose to, but someone needs me, and I need to keep you safe. So you must stay here, where it's warm, where people are around, where he can't hurt you." Marina clutched her as if she might disappear mid-breath. "When will you come back?" Elena forced the words through the fear clogging her throat. "Soon, I promise. I'll come back fast, faster than you think." Promises were fragile things, but she needed her daughter to believe in one. She spotted a kind-faced older woman at the far end of the laundromat, a mother herself. Judging by the stack of children's clothes she was folding, decision settled like fate. Elena walked Marina toward her. "Excuse me," she whispered, voice shaking. "My daughter. She needs to stay here for a few minutes while I make a quick call outside. Is it all right if she stays near you? I won't be long." The woman's eyes softened instantly, sensing the fear Elena tried to hide. "Of course, I'll keep her right by me." Marina clung to Elena's arm one final time, tears streaking her cheeks. "Mom, please." Elena cupped her face gently. "I will come back. I will, you trust me, right?" A small nod. A broken breath. Then Elena slipped her hand away. It felt like tearing her own heart out. She stepped outside the laundromat and into the sharp morning air. The world felt too bright, too indifferent to the storm tearing through her chest. The street lay quiet, the sky heavy with thick clouds that seemed unwilling to commit to a storm or to sunlight. The restaurant waited several blocks away, its silhouette crouched among forgotten buildings like a predator lying low. Elena walked quickly but cautiously, every footstep measured, every turn of the street checked twice. Her nerves crackled with dread, her thoughts looping in a dizzying spiral. They have him, he's alive. They want me, they'll kill him if I don't go. Her hands shook so violently, she shoved them into her pockets just to hide the tremors. When she reached East Harbor Street, the restaurant stood silent beneath the gray sky. Its windows looked darker than before, more watchful, more dangerous. The front door sat slightly ajar, not broken, not forced, just open enough for her to walk through without resistance, like an invitation. Or a trap. Elena hesitated, breath catching in her throat. Then she stepped inside. The restaurant swallowed her with its familiar cold. Shadows clung to the corners, still damp with the memory of yesterday's chaos. Dust drifted lazily in the thin threads of light that filtered through the boarded windows. Every creak, every breath of air, every whisper of settling wood made her jump. "Lorenzo," she called softly. Silence. She stepped deeper inside, her boots tapping gently against the worn floorboards. Then a shadow shifted along the far wall. She froze. "He's not here now." The voice slid across the room like cold oil. Darian emerged from the kitchen doorway, his coat falling in sharp lines against his frame. His expression was unreadable but unmistakably smug, the kind of calm that came from standing exactly where he wanted to stand. Elena's throat closed painfully. "Where is he?" Darian stepped closer, alive for the moment. She clenched her fists. "If you hurt him, you'll what?" Darian tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering. "Wave a crowbar at me again." Her stomach twisted. "You came," he continued, taking another measured step. "Good. It means you understand the stakes." Elena's voice trembled. "I want to see him." "In time," Darian said. "But first, you and I have unfinished business." Her heart pounded so hard her vision pulsed in rhythm. "What do you want?" Darian's eyes flickered, darkening. "The box. The steel box Matteo hid in the oven." The box that held the key, the box Lorenzo risked everything to retrieve. Elena swallowed. "I don't have it." Darian smiled thinly. "No lies, Elena. I despise lies." "I'm not lying," she whispered. "Lorenzo has it. I don't." Darian stopped, really stopped. His posture sharpened like a blade being drawn. "Elena," he murmured, "I gave you simple instructions. Come alone, bring nothing. And you did half of that." The way he stepped closer made her instincts scream. "You think," he said quietly, "that I don't know where Lorenzo would hide something this important? That I don't know how he moves, how he thinks, how he protects the worthless and betrays the powerful?" His voice remained soft as silk. "Too soft, too controlled. That box will find its way to me, one way or another." Elena's breath shook. "Just let him go, please." Darian's eyes narrowed. "Can't do that." "Why?" "Because Lorenzo made a mistake." He paused. He thought Matteo's death ended the game. His steps grew slower, colder. "But the truth is, Matteo only started it." Elena's pulse stuttered. "And now," Darian said softly, "you're part of it." She backed away until her spine hit the edge of a table. "Where is he?" she whispered again. "If you hurt him, I swear." Darian raised a hand in gentle interruption. "Elena, hurting him is optional, but hurting you," his gaze sharpened, "that depends on how cooperative you are." Her heart dropped. Darian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We're going to take a stroll. You and I." Her breath caught. "Where?" "Back to where it all started," he said. "The crawl space, the vault, the secret you pried open." "No," Elena whispered, shaking her head. "I'm not going back down there." Darian smiled, quiet, chilling. "Yes, you are." He stepped closer and closer until she could feel the cold shadow of him against her skin. "Because, Elena," he tilted his head, "that vault you opened, it's incomplete." Her body froze. "Incomplete," she whispered. "What are you talking about?" Darian leaned in so close she could hear the low rhythm of his breath. "The real secret Matteo hid," he murmured, "is still down there." Elena's breath stilled. A deeper vault, a deeper secret, a deeper danger, and Darian knew where it was. "Come," he said, "we're wasting time." Elena backed away instinctively, but Darian moved faster. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with terrifying precision. She gasped, pulse exploding. "Don't fight me," he whispered. "You'll lose." With one brutal yank, he pulled her toward the hallway, toward the floorboards she'd lifted, toward the dark mouth of the chamber below. And as the restaurant swallowed her again, its shadows tightening, its secrets yawning wide, Elena realized the terrifying truth. Everything she had uncovered so far, everything Matteo left behind, everything Lorenzo fought to protect, it was only the outer layer. The true nightmare waited deeper, and the story was only beginning. Darian's grip tightened around Elena's wrist as he dragged her down the narrow hallway, each step echoing with a cold inevitability. The restaurant's old boards groaned beneath their weight, as though warning her to run, to pull free, to do anything except descend into the darkness waiting below. But Darian's hand was unyielding. "A steel trap disguised as flesh. Stop pulling," he murmured without looking back. "You'll only bruise yourself." Elena stumbled behind him, her breath shallow, her pulse thundering in her ears. "Where is Lorenzo? What did you do to him?" Darian didn't answer. He reached the crawlspace opening, where the floorboards still sat stacked neatly against the wall from the day Elena discovered the chamber. The black hole yawned beneath them, as silent and cold as a grave. Darian turned to face her, then calm, composed, expression unreadable in the dim light. "He's alive," he said, "because he still has something I want." Elena's chest tightened. "The box." Darian nodded. "And he's smart enough to know I'll kill him the second he hands it over. So I keep him breathing. For now." He crouched to the opening, his voice floating up like a shadowy whisper. "But you, Elena, are the leverage." Her pulse jumped painfully. "Climb down," he said, "or Lorenzo's next breath will be his last." Elena's knees weakened. Her skin felt ice cold. The idea of descending into that suffocating concrete chamber again filled her with panic, a fear that clawed up her throat and threatened to swallow her whole. Darian watched her carefully. "You opened it before," he said. "You'll open more." She stared back at him, her voice cracking. "I'm not going down there with you. You don't get a choice." He didn't shout. He didn't threaten loudly. He simply stated a fact, a truth sharpened by years of power. Elena's breath shook as she lowered herself into the crawlspace. Her hands trembled. Her heart hammered violently. The metal ladder was cold beneath her palms as she descended into the chamber's stale air. The concrete room below felt colder now, as if the very walls remembered Darian's presence. The flashlight beam from above danced across the vault door she'd forced open earlier. Dust floated like pale embers. Darian stepped down behind her with quiet precision, landing softly on his feet. The small underground room felt instantly smaller. He walked past her, his boots echoing softly on the concrete floor. His eyes drifted over the cabinets, the ledgers, the old evidence Matteo had spent years collecting. Then he looked at the partially hidden side wall, the one Elena had barely noticed before the fight broke out. "You didn't find it," Darian said. Elena blinked. "Find what?" Darian pressed his palm against the wall. Dust fell away beneath his touch. "The second vault." Elena's breath hitched. "There's a second one," Darian smirked. Matteo was clever. He knew one chamber would eventually be found, so he built another, buried deeper, sealed with heat, reinforced with steel. His voice dropped lower. "And it holds the one thing that matters most." Elena stepped back instinctively, her voice trembling. "What's inside?" Darian paused, then turned to her slowly. "A list," he said, "with every name tied to the syndicate, their operations, their handlers, their debts, their accounts, their betrayals, their vulnerabilities." Her heart pounded, breath stuttering. Why would Matteo hide that? Why not destroy it? Darian leaned closer, his breath chilling her skin. Because information is more dangerous than bullets. Matteo wasn't trying to escape the syndicate. He was trying to expose them. He studied her expression, the shock, the horror. He just didn't live long enough. Elena felt her legs weaken. Matteo had died trying to save the city from the monsters he once served, and now she understood why the syndicate wanted his secrets buried so deeply that even time would never uncover them. "Now," Darian said, straightening, "help me find the second vault." Elena stepped back, shaking her head. "I'm not helping you." Darian's eyes flickered with a cold irritation, his jaw tightening. He raised a small device, a phone, and tapped the screen. A muffled voice came through, Lorenzo, breathing hard, alive, barely, Elena. His voice was strained, cracked. Don't do it, don't. A harsh choke cut him off. Elena's blood turned to ice. Darian lowered the device slowly. He lives or dies based on your cooperation. Elena felt her eyes burn. Please, just let him go. You want him alive? Darian asked. Then work. He gestured to the reinforced wall. Matteo left clues. Lorenzo believed the oven held the key, and he was right, partially, but the full key requires more. What more? Elena whispered. Darian reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of thick, yellowed paper. He handed it to her. Elena unfolded it with trembling hands. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a blueprint not of the restaurant, but of the underground chamber, except this drawing showed the hidden vault's deeper structure. Lines, symbols, reinforcements, a single circle marked on the far left wall, a location, a door buried behind concrete. Her voice shook. Matteo made this. Darian nodded once, and he hid the original blueprint where only someone desperate enough would dig it up. The oven, the steel box, the brass key, everything had been leading here. Darian crouched, running his fingers along the base of the wall where the blueprint indicated a weak point. Start here, he said. Remove the panel. Elena stared at him. I've never opened anything like this. You opened the first vault, he replied, and you opened it well. She swallowed painfully, her stomach twisted in fear. But Lorenzo's voice echoing through the phone replayed in her mind, breathless, broken. She couldn't let him die. She knelt beside the wall, pressing her fingertips against the cold concrete. She could feel it, the faint tremor beneath the surface, a hollow space behind the stone. She reached for a loose metal tool on the floor, a heavy chisel. She slid the metal edge into the line between the bricks and hammered once. A crack. Darian watched her with quiet anticipation. She hit again. Another crack. Dust spilled across her hands. Her heartbeat roared. Sweat beaded at her brow. She struck again, harder, harder, until a brick loosened just slightly. Darian crouched beside her and murmured, "Good," again. She wanted to spit in his face, but she didn't dare. Not while Lorenzo's life balanced on her compliance. She struck again. The first brick broke free. Behind it, darkness. A deeper passage. A deeper vault. Her breath trembled as she peered through the narrow gap. Darian's voice slid across her ear, quiet and triumphant. "Open it." She worked faster now, not for him, but for Lorenzo, for Marina, for the desperate hope that if she found the vault first, maybe she could leverage it. Somehow, brick by brick, the opening widened. Cold air spilled out like the breath of a frozen beast. The passage beyond the wall waited narrow, ominous, lined with steel support beams. A faint glint at the far end hinted at metal, a door larger than the first vault, sealed with thick bolts and an intricate locking mechanism. Elena stepped back, exhausted, dust coating her fingers. Darian straightened slowly, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "There it is," he whispered, "the heart of the syndicate." He stepped toward the passage, then stopped, his head tilted slightly. Elena frowned. "What?" He raised a finger. Silence. Then they both heard it, a soft click, like a door upstairs. Elena's breath froze. Darian's eyes sharpened. Someone was in the restaurant. Not Marina, she was safe at the laundromat. Not the syndicate, they wouldn't knock softly. Not Lorenzo, he wouldn't be able to come. So who? Footsteps echoed above them, slow, deliberate. Then Elena. The voice drifted down the crawl space like a fragile miracle. "Lorenzo?" Darian's expression hardened instantly, rage flaring in his eyes. "Elena?" Lorenzo called again. "Are you down there?" Darian lunged toward the ladder. Elena reacted without thinking. She grabbed the heavy metal toolbox beside her and hurled it at Darian with everything she had. It hit his shoulder enough to stagger him. Enough to buy a second, a single second. She screamed up the ladder, voice cracking with urgency. Lorenzo Aruen. Darian recovered instantly, and chaos erupted in the chamber. The deeper vault loomed behind them. The secret Matteo died for pulsed in the shadows, and Elena, dust, covered and shaking, realized with brutal clarity whatever happened next would change everything. Because the story was only beginning. The moment Elena's scream tore through the crawlspace, Lorenzo, run, the underground chamber erupted into frantic motion. Dust shook loose from the ceiling. The single exposed bulb flickered wildly, throwing jagged shadows across the vault walls. Darian's jaw tightened into a deadly snarl as he lunged toward the ladder with terrifying precision. Elena didn't think. She didn't breathe. She grabbed the chisel lying near her feet and thrust herself between Darian and the ladder, a move so reckless she barely recognized it as her own. Darian shoved her aside with a force that sent her crashing into the concrete, pain exploding up her shoulder. She gasped, vision blurring, but stayed conscious long enough to see him climb halfway up the ladder. Above them, Lorenzo's voice cracked through the darkness once more. "Elena, hold on." The words were raw, desperate, a voice stretched thin across a breaking edge. Darian's head snapped upward. Lorenzo wasn't running. He wasn't leaving her. He was coming down. The impact came fast. A boot struck Darian square in the chest, sending him falling backward into the chamber. He hit the floor hard, dust erupting around him in a cloud. Lorenzo dropped the rest of the way down, landing between Darian and Elena with a pained grunt. His face was bruised, one eye swollen, a thin cut bleeding down his cheek, but he was alive. And furious, "Elena," he grabbed her arm, pulling her upright. "Stay behind me." Her breath shook as she nodded. Darian pushed himself up, wiping dust from his coat as though brushing off an inconvenience. His expression twisted into a smile that chilled Elena's blood. "Well," he murmured, voice eerily calm, "isn't this becoming tiresome?" Lorenzo positioned himself in front of Elena, body angled defensively. "Let her go, Darian. She's got nothing to do with this." Darian lifted a brow. She opened the floor. She opened the vault. She opened the second vault. She has everything to do with this. He took a slow step forward, dust swirling around his boots. "And you, my dear Lorenzo, you never knew when to walk away." Lorenzo tensed. Elena felt the air between them crackle, not just with danger, but with something older, heavier, a history she was only beginning to understand. Darian's voice remained low, almost affectionate in its cruelty. "You always were sentimental." Lorenzo's bruised jaw tightened. "And you always were a monster." Darian smiled faintly. "A monster with purpose." He took another step. Lorenzo didn't retreat. "You're not leaving with that vault." "Oh," Darian's eyes gleamed. "Then who will you?" Silence. The cold chamber seemed to exhale, the shadows thickening behind Darian's shoulders. Darian glanced toward the gaping hole. Elena had opened in the wall the tunnel leading to the deeper vault. The place Matteo had sealed with fear and fire. "Matteo always thought he could outrun us," Darian said, voice softening into something chilling. "He believed he could choose the terms of his escape, that he could rewrite the rules." His gaze narrowed. He was wrong. The words echoed like a verdict. Lorenzo lunged first, faster than Elena expected, his fist slicing through the air. Darian pivoted, barely flinching, blocking the blow with effortless precision. The two collided in a blur of motion, a harsh, violent rhythm that ricocheted off the concrete walls. A punch, a counterpunch, a brutal slam into the shelving unit. Metal clattered, tools fell, dust spun into the air like broken ghosts. Elena scrambled backward, heart pounding, trying to stay out of the way, trying to think, trying to find anything she could use. Darian slammed Lorenzo against the wall with a sickening thud. Lorenzo gasped, knees buckling. "Still fighting for people who don't belong to you." Darian hissed. "Did you learn nothing from Matteo's death?" Lorenzo spat blood, face twisting with pain. I learned everything." With a sudden surge, he drove his shoulder into Darian, sending both men crashing into the central steel table. Files and photographs scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Elena watched helplessly, her chest constricting with panic. She couldn't lose him, not after everything, not now. Darian recovered quickly, slamming his elbow into Lorenzo's ribs. A sharp crack echoed. Lorenzo fell to one knee, breath punched out of him. "Elena," he rasped, voice strained. "Run, no," Darian said sharply, his voice slicing through the air. He grabbed Lorenzo by the collar and hauled him upright, holding him in a tight chokehold as he reached into his coat with his free hand. Elena froze when she saw what he drew out, a lighter, small, silver, flickering. "You opened the vaults," Darian said, his voice turning soft, almost gentle. "You should have considered the consequences." Elena's chest locked. "No," Darian's smile darkened. "This building still reeks of gas, old lines, broken seals. A single flame can change everything." Lorenzo's eyes widened with horror. "Darian, don't." Darian leaned close to Elena, eyes burning with twisted amusement. "Either the vault burns," he whispered, "or you do." With his thumb, he flicked the lighter, a spark, a flame, a terrible, quiet promise. Elena staggered back as heat brushed her face. Her breath hitched. Panic surged. She could feel the walls tightening, the underground room shrinking. Darian tilted the flame toward a fallen pipe, the one Lorenzo had knocked loose during the fight. Gas hissed faintly from its broken edge. Lorenzo's voice cracked. "Darian, stop." But Darian was no longer listening. His gaze locked onto Elena with a chilling calm. "You want the truth," he whispered. "Everything Matteo died for, everything buried under these floors." He lifted the flame higher. "Then let's see how much truth survives a fire." Time froze. Elena's pulse ruptured into frantic terror. "No!" she screamed, lunging forward instinctively. The flame touched the gas. A violent blast roared through the chamber, a flash of heat, a thunderous shockwave, a storm of dust and fire tearing through the walls. Concrete cracked, metal bent, the world erupted. Elena was thrown backward into darkness, air knocked from her lungs. She hit the ground hard, vision spinning, ears ringing, smoke filling the chamber in thick, choking clouds. The blast tore the ceiling above them. Wood splintered. Flames licked up the walls, hungry and wild. Somewhere through the smoke, Lorenzo cried out, a raw sound cut short as debris crashed around him. Elena tried to move, to crawl, to breathe, but the world tilted violently, heat scorching her skin. Through the thick haze, Darian staggered to his feet, thrown off, balanced but not defeated. He wiped blood from his forehead, expression flickering with rage. "Elena," he called, voice echoing, "this isn't over." The chamber shook again. Another beam collapsed. Fire spread. Elena forced air into her lungs, forced her body to crawl toward the ladder, even as flames danced toward her, and the vault wall crumbled behind her. The restaurant Matteo's, secrets, everything hidden beneath the floorboards, was burning. And as heat clawed at her heels and the chamber swallowed itself in smoke, Elena realized one final truth as she pulled herself toward the collapsing ladder. The fire wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fight Matteo never finished. And the story was only beginning. The walls trembled. Smoke bled through every crack. Flames licked hungrily along the concrete floor, swallowing papers, photographs, every trace of Matteo's work in burning waves. The one silent vault had become a furnace, a collapsing tomb built from secrets and ash. Elena's lungs seized, every breath scorched. The blast had left her ears ringing with a dull, violent throb, but she could still hear the fire roaring, a sound like 1,000 furious voices crying out at once. Her fingers scraped the floor as she crawled, coughing violently, eyes stinging with tears she couldn't wipe away. She reached the ladder, vision flickering in and out through the smoke. "Lorenzo," she choked, voice raw, no answer, only the crackle of flames. "Lorenzo," she screamed again, fear shredding her insides. A weak cough answered somewhere deeper in the chamber. A figure moved in the haze, staggering, collapsing, trying desperately to stand again. Lorenzo. His coat was torn, face smeared with soot, one arm limp at his side. But he was alive, barely. Elena's heart surged. "I'm coming," she cried, dragging herself away from the ladder and crawling toward him despite the choking smoke. A shadow moved behind Lorenzo, tall, steady, unharmed by the chaos he caused. Darian. He stepped through the smoke like a phantom sculpted from flame and hatred, one hand braced against the wall for balance, face marked with fury, not fear. "Foolish," he rasped, coughing once into his fist. "All of you, so foolish." Lorenzo tried to stand but collapsed again as Darian approached. Elena felt terror clamp down on her throat. "Stay away from him," she shouted, lungs burning. Darian didn't even glance at her. He grabbed Lorenzo by the collar, hauling him up like discarded weight. Lorenzo gasped in pain. "Darian, don't. You had your chance." Darian snarled. "But you chose loyalty, and loyalty gets you killed." He lifted his lighter again, a small, gleaming silver spark in the red glow of the flames. Elena's body ignited with panic. "No," she screamed. She stumbled to her feet, barely dizzy and coughing, and lunged. Darian turned at the last moment. Her shoulder collided with his side, knocking him off balance. The lighter fell, clattering across the concrete. Darian cursed, shoving Elena backward with brutal force. She hit the metal shelving behind her. The impact sent tools raining down onto the floor. Through choking breaths, Lorenzo pushed himself upright, staggering between Elena and Darian. "Touch her again," he rasped, voice trembling but defiant, "and I swear, I'll kill you." Darian stared at him, stunned, then amused, then furious. "You," Darian hissed, "you can barely stand." He stepped forward, but the fire swallowed the right side of the chamber, a wooden beam collapsing between them with a violent crash, sparks exploding into the air. Smoke thickened, choking everything it touched. Darian shielded his eyes, coughing hard. The moment fractured, chaotic, blinding, desperate. "Elena," Lorenzo shouted, "the ladder, go." She blinked through smoke, tears spilling freely now. "What about you? Go," he repeated, voice cracking. "Get out, get her safe." Her heart battled itself, the urge to fight, to stay, to pull him with her. But Lorenzo was already pushing forward, staggering into the smoke, trying to buy her one more second, one more breath. Darian roared, lunging after him. Elena turned and ran. Her hands found the ladder, hot metal searing her palms. She climbed with every ounce of strength left in her shaking limbs, coughing violently as heat clawed at her back. Her vision blurred, one rung, then another, a large chunk of ceiling crashed behind her. Sparks shot upward. Heat flared against her neck. Flames followed her like hungry beasts. She reached the top and hauled herself out of the crawl space, just as the floor beneath her buckled with a terrifying boom. The restaurant's wooden beams cracked loudly, the sound of a dying building screaming into the air. "Elena," the voice jolted her. She spun. Marina stood at the entrance, tears streaking her cheeks, lungs heaving, eyes wide with terror. "Mom," she sobbed. "Mom, I'm sorry. I followed you. I got scared." Elena's blood froze. The laundromat? She'd left her there, but Marina must have panicked and run. She grabbed Marina instantly, pulling her away from the collapsing crawl space. "Sweetheart, you have to stay behind me." But the building was collapsing too fast. Flames climbed the walls, devouring the old wallpaper, curling around beams, swallowing the ceiling. "Elena," the voice wasn't Lorenzo this time. Through the smoke-choked room, a figure burst from the back hallway, soot covered, limping but alive. "Lorenzo." He stumbled toward them, coughing violently. "The building. It's going, RUN." Darian's voice rose behind him like a dark omen. "You won't escape." Elena grabbed Marina's hand. Lorenzo grabbed Elena's arm. Together they ran. Fire chased their heels, sparks clinging to their clothes. The ceiling groaned overhead, a window shattered, flames licking outward. Smoke swirled, thick and blinding. They burst through the front doors just as the roof caved inward with a savage roar. A blast of heat swallowed the street behind them, pushing Elena forward. She fell to her knees on the cold pavement, clutching Marina against her chest as the entire front of the restaurant collapsed in a storm of fire and debris. She gasped for air, lungs burning, tears streaking her soot-covered face. Lorenzo crumpled beside her, coughing hard, barely clinging to consciousness. Behind them, flames devoured the restaurant faster than the wind could carry the smoke away. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. But through the fire's roar, a new sound cut into the smoke. Filled air, a single voice, Darian's voice, from inside the burning ruins. "You think this stops me?" Elena's heart dropped. "You can burn the walls," he shouted. "Burn the secrets, burn my men, but you can't burn the truth." She swallowed hard, terror knotting her stomach. Darian's silhouette appeared in the collapsing doorway, blurred but unmistakably alive, framed by fire like a devil stepping out of the flames. "Elena." His voice was raw and furious. "I will find you." Lorenzo grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet with the last of his strength. "Elena, move," he rasped. "We have to go, now." She lifted Marina into her arms, tears spilling, and ran away from the burning restaurant, away from the collapsed vault, away from the monster walking through the fire. They didn't look back, not once, because the inferno behind them wasn't an ending. It was a warning, a beginning, a war that had only just revealed its true face. And as Elena disappeared into the rising sirens and smoke, clutching her daughter and fighting to keep Lorenzo standing, she understood with chilling clarity the fire wasn't the resolution. It was the ignition. And the story was only beginning. The sun had barely risen when Elena felt the weight of an entire night collapse into her chest. Smoke still clung to her hair. Soot stained the creases of her palms. The echo of fire roaring, collapsing, devouring every trace of Matteo's secrets, lingered in her ears like a fading scream. She sat on the curb of a quiet street, several blocks from the ruins, Marina curled in her lap, trembling softly. Lorenzo crouched against a lamppost nearby, clutching his ribs with one hand, his breathing ragged. His face was ash, streaked, bruised, but alive. Alive. That was all that mattered for now. Distant sirens continued to wail behind them, the faint chorus of firefighters battling what was left of the restaurant. But here in this small, deserted pocket of dawn, there was only stillness. Stillness wrapped in exhaustion. Stillness wrapped in fear. Stillness wrapped in the fragile thread of survival. Elena gently stroked Marina's hair, whispering soft words just to hear something other than the sound of her own shaking breath. "It's over, sweetheart. We're here. We're safe." But even as she said the words, Elena felt the truth tighten inside her. It wasn't over. Not with Darian still alive. Not with the steel box in Lorenzo's coat. Not with Matteo's final secret still burning in the shadows of her mind. Lorenzo staggered toward them, wincing with each step. "We need to move," he muttered, voice scraping like gravel. "We can't stay in the open." Elena nodded, though her legs trembled violently as she stood. "Where do we go? Someplace no one looks twice at," he said. "Someplace quiet, hidden, no records, no cameras." She studied him. "Do you have somewhere in mind?" A hollow breath escaped him. "I do." He didn't explain. He simply held out his hand, a silent request for trust she had no choice but to give. Elena took Marina's hand, and together they followed Lorenzo through the quiet dawn streets. The city felt different in the early light, hollowed, weary, as though exhausted by the fire that had ripped through the night. Smoke drifted faintly above the rooftops, casting a grey haze over everything. At one point, a fire truck roared past, red lights slicing through the fog. Elena instinctively lowered her head, shielding Marina. Lorenzo pulled them into the shadows of a recessed doorway until the truck disappeared. "Are they going to look for us?" Elena whispered. "Maybe not them," Lorenzo murmured, "but Darien will." The name chilled her more than the cold morning wind. They walked for several blocks until the city transformed into something older, forgotten rows of shuttered shops, graffiti, covered walls, abandoned apartments with cracked windows and sinking steps. Lorenzo led them into an alley, then down a narrow stairway behind a boarded thrift store. He knocked twice on a rusted metal door, waited, then knocked once more, a rhythm that sounded like an old memory. The door opened with a long, reluctant groan. The space beyond was dim, lit only by a single bulb that buzzed softly overhead. It smelled of dust, old coal, and faint traces of oil. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, tools, and forgotten relics. "An old boiler room," Lorenzo said. "I used it years ago when I needed a place to disappear." Elena stepped inside, clutching Marina close. "Will he find us here?" she whispered. Lorenzo bolted the door. "Not yet," but the shadow over his expression said more. Darien always found his way eventually. Marina sat on a folded blanket in the corner, curling into herself. Elena knelt beside her, brushing a thumb across her cheek. "You're safe," she whispered again. "We're safe." But her voice cracked on the last word. Lorenzo sat heavily on an overturned crate, pulling the steel box from his coat. Even in the dim light, it seemed to glow a small, cold sun made of secrets. Elena stared at it, her heart tightening. That little thing caused all of this. "No," Lorenzo murmured. "What's inside it did." He ran his thumb across the engraved rings on the clasp, as though trying to decode Matteo's fears through touch alone. "Did you look inside?" Elena asked. Lorenzo shook his head. "Not yet. Matteo told me. If I ever opened it, my life would change forever. I wasn't ready." He lifted his bruised face toward her. "But now, we don't have a choice." Elena pulled Marina's blanket tighter around her shoulders, the cold settling deep into her bones. Darien said the real danger wasn't the money or the evidence, but the list. "The list," Lorenzo repeated. The names of every corrupt official, every syndicate handler, every operative Matteo uncovered. Elena swallowed hard, enough to take the entire empire down, enough to bring hell onto anyone who touches it. The room hummed with a heavy silence. Lorenzo pressed the clasps on the steel box, a soft click, a slow creak, the lid opened. Inside lay a stack of envelopes tied with twine, each one labeled in Matteo's handwriting. Beneath them, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, rested a thin metal binder with rusted edges. Lorenzo lifted the first envelope. "These are letters." Elena leaned closer. "From Matteo, yes, addressed to the people he trusted." His voice softened, "and to the people he feared." He set the letters down and reached for the binder. "Elena," his breath wavered. "This is it." He opened the binder, folded papers, photographs, maps, ledgers, names, dates, transactions, hideouts, codes, an entire criminal empire reduced to ink and truth. Elena felt a jolt of dread and awe. "This could destroy them," she whispered, "and it could destroy us." Lorenzo said, "Darien will hunt this until the end of the earth." Elena's voice cracked. "So what do we do?" Lorenzo closed the binder, jaw tightening. "We make a choice." He looked between Elena and Marina, mother and daughter, wrapped in exhaustion, fear, and a desperate, fragile hope that this nightmare might finally end. Matteo wanted it all exposed, Lorenzo said. He wanted the money to help people. He wanted the syndicate to fall. He wanted redemption for himself, for this city. Elena's eyes filled with a slow, burning realization. "And you think we should finish what he started?" she whispered. Lorenzo nodded, but his expression was heavy because he understood exactly what that meant. Danger, loss, sacrifice, a fight they could not walk away from. Elena looked at Marina, asleep now, her small body curled like a question mark against the blanket. "I want her to have a life," Elena whispered, "a real chance, no more running, no more fear." She looked back at the steel box. "If stopping them gives her that, then yes, we finish what Matteo started." Lorenzo exhaled slowly, part relief, part dread. "Elena, once we do this, there's no turning back." "I know." The bulb overhead flickered. The room shifted with the weight of the choice, just made a choice that would ripple across everything that followed. Lorenzo set the binder gently back inside the box. "We'll rebuild what we can from Matteo's notes, find the accounts, find the handlers, and when the time is right, we bring it all forward." Elena nodded, steady now. "What about the money?" she asked. Lorenzo hesitated. "It's still in the ruins, hidden under the collapsed floorboards." Elena closed her eyes. The restaurant burned, broken, gone, still held the stolen fortune that started this entire nightmare. Lorenzo watched her carefully. "Elena, that money could buy new identities, protection, escape." She opened her eyes. "No," she said softly, "it could rebuild a community, feed families, protect others the way I wanted to protect Marina." Her voice strengthened layer by layer. "If Matteo wanted redemption, then that money can be its beginning." Lorenzo studied her heat, softening the edges of his guarded stare. Finally, he nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." Elena felt something stir within her, not confidence, not victory, but a quiet resolve. Outside, the sun lifted higher, pushing light through the narrow alleyways of the forgotten district. The fire behind them had ended, but the mission Matteo died for, the truth he buried, the hope he left in ashes, had only just begun to rise. And as Elena tightened her fingers around the steel box and pulled Marina close with her other arm, she felt it deep in her bones. The story was only beginning. The day stretched long and heavy as Elena sat in the dimly lit boiler room, the steel box resting between her and Lorenzo like a quiet, pulsing heart. The air trembled with the weight of what they had uncovered, the kind of truth that could unmake worlds, rebuild others, and destroy anyone standing in its way. For a while neither spoke. They simply breathed, healing, absorbing, accepting. Marina slept soundly beside her mother, exhaustion smoothing the fear from her face. The faint hum of pipes overhead wrapped the room in a low, steady rhythm, a reminder that life, for the moment, still moved forward. Lorenzo shifted, wincing as he adjusted his bruised ribs. "We should move before sunset," he murmured. "Darian won't stop after the fire. He'll think you died, but he'll look for a body eventually." Elena wrapped Marina's blanket tighter around her daughter. "Where do we go?" "Someplace he wouldn't expect." Lorenzo rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The city has shadows even Darian doesn't see." Elena gave a faint, tired laugh. "Are we just going to keep running forever?" Lorenzo met her eyes. "No, we're going to finish this. You said so yourself." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we need a plan." Lorenzo opened the steel box again, revealing Matteo's letters, the stack tied with worn twine, and the slim binder of dangerous truth. He picked up one envelope, running his thumb over Matteo's handwriting. "He wrote this to me," Lorenzo said quietly, "the day before he disappeared." Elena leaned forward. "What does it say?" Lorenzo hesitated, then broke the seal. The paper inside was fragile, yellowed at the edges, Matteo's handwriting uneven but urgent. Lorenzo read aloud, "If you're reading this, brother, then I failed. But listen to me, you must not let them take the ledger, not ever. Everything they are is written inside. And everything they fear depends on whether someone dares to bring truth to light. I'm sorry I dragged you into this, But if we stay silent, we feed them, we give them breath, we let them rule the shadows they've poisoned for decades. If I disappear, tell someone worthy. Tell someone who still believes good can come from broken things." Lorenzo's voice faltered on the last line. Elena felt a sting at the back of her eyes. He knew this would happen. He did, Lorenzo said softly. He hoped desperately that someone would be strong enough to pick up the pieces. Elena lowered her gaze, emotions swirling like ripples across the surface of her soul. Someone worthy, someone who believed good could come from broken things. Was that really her? She wasn't a detective, she wasn't a hero. She was a single mother who bought a failing restaurant for one last chance at survival. But maybe that was exactly why Matteo chose her. Because desperation sharpens courage, and broken things see the cracks in others more clearly than anyone else. Lorenzo carefully folded the letter again, his breathing heavy. "He meant you, Elena," she blinked. "What? You found the vault, the code, the truth?" Lorenzo's gaze softened. He trusted that whoever discovered his secrets would have the heart to carry them forward. Her throat tightened. I'm not strong enough to fight an empire." "You're stronger than you think." She shook her head. "No, Lorenzo, I'm terrified." So was Matteo. He whispered. The room fell quiet, their fears settling between them like dust. Then Elena wiped her eyes and inhaled deeply. "What do we do first?" Lorenzo lifted the binder, the master ledger, and opened it to a page Matteo had bookmarked. "This," he said, tapping a long list of names. "These are the local figures who worked with the syndicate. City planners, inspectors, bankers, restaurant owners, judges." Elena's jaw clenched. "Corruption everywhere, everywhere," Lorenzo said. Matteo gathered accounts, addresses, times, dates, enough to build a case, or bury us. Elena's eyes drifted to the bottom of the list. One name made her breath catch. A name tied to the old restaurant, a name tied to the auction she won, a name tied to the night everything began. Councilman Reed. Elena stared at it, shock folding over her like a cold wave. He signed off on the building's sale. Lorenzo nodded grimly. He hoped the restaurant would stay buried, forgotten, dilapidated, a grave for Matteo's secrets. You buying it messed up their plan. Elena swallowed. So Reed is involved with Darian. He's the one who funded him. Lorenzo clenched his fists. That's why Darian knew everything, knew where to go, who to threaten. He had government hands feeding him information. Elena's stomach turned. So they'll never stop. "No," Lorenzo said, "not until Darian gets this." He tapped the steel box. "Or until someone forces their world into the light." Elena looked at Marina, at her sleeping face, peaceful and innocent, unaware of the war swirling around her. Her daughter deserved more. Her city deserved more. Matteo deserved more. Elena straightened her back. "Then we expose them." Lorenzo blinked. "Elena, this isn't just a risk, this is suicide." She nodded. "Maybe, but if we run they keep winning. If we fight even a little, everything Matteo died for will matter." Lorenzo studied her, the way her fear trembled but didn't collapse, the way her resolve flickered like a candle refusing to die. Finally he spoke. "There's someone," he said. Someone Matteo trusted. A journalist, investigative, careful. He helped Matteo once before, and Matteo hid his name in the letters. He sorted through the envelopes until he found one marked with a single, sharp initial, A. "Who is he?" Elena asked. "Not local," Lorenzo replied. "He works underground, off-grid. He's the kind of man who'd give his life to bring down the syndicate." Elena's pulse quickened. "Where does he live?" "Far," Lorenzo murmured. "But reachable." He turned to her fully. "If we can get the binder into his hands, we might still have a chance." Elena nodded slowly. "Let's go." Lorenzo shook his head. "We can't, not yet." "Why not?" Because the syndicate knows the fire wasn't an accident. Because Reed will be calling Darien. Because the city is waking up to the smell of burned timber and stolen fortune. He paused, and because we're not ready. Elena frowned. Ready for what? Lorenzo reached into the box again and pulled out a single folded page, the only one sealed in wax. He handed it to her. This, he said, is Matteo's final instruction, his last message. Elena's hands trembled as she cracked the seal. Inside were 8 words, 8 small, simple words that changed everything. The money is not what it seems. Elena stared. What does that mean? She whispered. Lorenzo exhaled slowly. It means what I feared, the 90 million, the crates, the bills beneath the floors. He met her eyes. Some of it is real. I pause, but some of it is marked. Elena's breath caught. Marked. The syndicate tracks it. Serial numbers, chemical tracers. They can follow it anywhere. Elena's blood turned cold. If we try to use it, Lorenzo whispered, they'll find us before the money even leaves our hands. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, breath stuttering. So we can't keep it, she said. We can't spend it, Lorenzo corrected. Then what do we do with $90 million we can't use? Lorenzo looked down at Matteo's final line, written shakily at the bottom of the page. Clean the fortune, cleanse the city. Elena gasped softly. Matteo didn't want the money spent. He wanted it transformed, turned into something pure, something good, something untraceable, something that could no longer feed evil hands. Suddenly, the path ahead became clear, terrifying, dangerous, but clear. We use it to rebuild, Elena whispered, to restore what they destroyed, to help the people Matteo wanted to help. Her chest swelled with a quiet, fierce purpose. Lorenzo watched her with awe, the exhausted, soot-covered mother who had crawled through fire, fear, and shadows. Now standing straight, now choosing something greater than fear, greater than survival. Then we need to move fast, Lorenzo said. We need to get the binder to the journalist, and we need to destroy the marked bills before Darien finds them. Elena exhaled. This is going to change everything. Lorenzo nodded. It will, he whispered, for better or for worse. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting light through the cracks of the boarded windows, illuminating Elena, Marina, Lorenzo, and the steel box that held enough truth and danger to topple an empire. Elena tightened her grip on her daughter and stood slowly. We start today, she said. And in the quiet of that forgotten boiler room, surrounded by remnants of fire and ash, Elena felt it again. The fire hadn't ended the story. It had ignited a new one, and the story was only beginning. Morning arrived with a softness Elena had almost forgotten existed. For the first time in many months, light didn't feel like an enemy prying into her wounds. It felt warm, gentle, like a quiet promise resting on her shoulders. The restaurant, once a ruin, once a battleground, once a tomb for secrets, was now reborn, rebuilt brick by brick, cleaned floorboard by floorboard, restored with hands that believed in redemption just as Matteo once did. Opening day had come. The new wooden sign above the entrance gleamed beneath the rising sun, catching sparks of gold across the fresh varnish. The same building that once hid $90 million beneath rotting planks now shone with purpose, every corner humming with life. Marina tugged on Elena's sleeve, her eyes wide as she watched workers adjust the last lanterns outside. Mom, there are so many people already. Elena smiled, a soft, shaky smile warmed by disbelief. I know. I didn't think the line would be this long. But the line was long, stretching down the sidewalk, curling around the block. People from shelters, families she'd helped through donation centers, volunteers, community leaders, old friends and complete strangers who'd heard about the mother who rebuilt hope from ashes. They weren't here to witness a miracle. They were here because they had been touched by it. Lorenzo stepped beside her, adjusting his clean shirt collar with an awkward tug. The bruises on his face had finally faded, though a small scar cut across his cheek like a permanent reminder of everything they endured. "You ready?" he asked softly. Elena inhaled long, deep, grounding. "I think so." But part of her still trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the journey behind her, the whispers of broken floorboards. Matteo's coded notebook, Darian's footsteps in the dark, the fire that nearly took her life, the ledger of names still waiting to be exposed. All of it lived quietly inside her, not haunting her, but shaping her. Inside the restaurant, soft music played. Warm lights glowed across spotless tables, carrying the faint scent of freshly baked bread and simmering herbs. It was nothing like the decayed corpse it had once been. This place breathed now. Lorenzo stepped forward and quietly unlocked the front doors. The crowd erupted with cheers. Marina clapped her hands, eyes shining. "Can I go in first, please?" Elena lifted her daughter into her arms. "Of course, my soul. You're the reason any of this exists." They stepped inside together. The restaurant bloomed open around them, cozy, welcoming, filled with laughter and shifting shadows of people filing in behind them. But it wasn't the newness of the space that made Elena's heart twist. It was the wall, a tribute wall, where Matteo's letters hung in slender frames, the ones safe enough to show. Beside them, a photograph of a man in his chef whites, laughing, flour dusting his hands like snow. His eyes, kind and bright, watched the room with a gentleness that drew every guest to pause. "Matteo's corner," Marina said proudly, pointing. "Miss Anna helped me put the flowers there." Elena brushed her fingers across her daughter's hair. "He'd be honored." Lorenzo stood a few steps behind them, staring at his brother's photo with a mixture of longing and sorrow. He deserved this, he whispered, a place filled with life, not secrets. Elena took his hand, a quiet gesture of solidarity, not romance, just two survivors holding onto the last piece of someone who saved them both. A volunteer approached them, breathless. "Elena, the staff is ready. Everyone's asking for you." She nodded, heart pounding. "All right." She stepped onto the small platform near the entryway, nothing grand, just a raised area where a host might typically stand. The room quieted slowly, faces turning toward her, eyes soft with warmth and expectation. Elena cleared her throat, her voice catching at first. "Thank you, all of you, for being here today." Her fingers trembled, but her voice steadied. "When I walked into this building the first time, it was falling apart. I was falling apart too. I had lost my job, my hope, and almost everything that mattered." Her breath softened as Marina rested her tiny hand over hers. "But sometimes," she continued, "life hides opportunity in the places we least expect it. Under broken floorboards, inside old walls, in strangers who become family." Lorenzo's gaze flickered downward, humbled. This restaurant was once home to a man who lost his way and tried to make things right before it was too late. Someone who believed in second chances and in serving people with heart. She looked toward Matteo's photograph. "And today, we honor that." A swell of soft applause filled the space. "We rebuilt this place." Elena said, "Not to chase money, not to chase fame, but to create a space for our community, a place where every dollar spent helps someone who needs a fresh start, a warm meal, or a hand to hold." She stepped down slowly, eyes glistening. "Welcome," she whispered, "to the new beginning." The crowd cheered, warm, loud, alive. Lorenzo leaned in. "You did good," he murmured. Elena laughed softly. "I almost cried." "You were supposed to. This whole place is built on tears." She nudged him lightly, "Yours included." He winced playfully, "Mostly mine." Marina darted forward. "Mom, look." Elena followed her daughter's pointing finger. A long table near the back was filled not with wealthy patrons, not with donors, not with influencers, but with families from the shelter Elena had supported earlier that month. Children laughed over warm pastries. Parents smiled through tired eyes. People who had once felt forgotten now glowed beneath soft lights. Elena's chest tightened the good kind of ache. "What do you think?" Lorenzo asked quietly, watching her. She inhaled, voice softening into something close to awe. "I think Matteo was right," she whispered. "Good really can come from broken things." The moment hung there, warm and quiet. Then Marina tugged them both toward the tables. "Come on, the line's getting long." Elena squeezed her hand, her heart fuller than it had been in years. The restaurant bustled with life now, people eating, laughing, sharing joy in a place that once fed only despair. Every detail Elena had poured her soul into was touched by purpose. The new wooden beams overhead, the glowing lanterns, the gentle clatter of plates, and the soft hum of voices blending together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. And as she walked between the tables, greeting guests, hearing their stories, watching Marina spin in delighted circles near the pastry counter, Elena felt something shift inside her, a quiet, steady warmth filling the hollow spaces fear once carved out. Hope, joy, safety, and for the first time in a long time, she believed they might actually last, because while danger had shaped the path behind her, the future felt brighter, forged not from fire, but from the choice to rise from its ashes. And the story was only beginning. The restaurant had been open for less than 2 hours, yet Elena already felt time stretching and folding around her like a living heartbeat. Every corner buzzed with movement, every table filled with stories. Every smile reminded her that this place, this miracle stitched from ashes, was now part of the neighborhood's pulse. But beneath that warm hum, a quieter world breathed. The world of what she and Lorenzo still carried, the world of Matteo's final truth, the world that hadn't yet reached the surface. Elena moved through the crowd, offering greetings, checking dishes, adjusting small details out of habit. Marina followed her like a bright spark, darting between tables, hugging volunteers she recognized from the shelters. A moment later, as Elena paused near the tribute wall, a soft voice spoke behind her. "You did something extraordinary." She turned. An elderly woman stood before Matteo's picture, her silver hair tied neatly, her posture gentle but firm. She held a steaming cup of herbal tea in both hands. Elena offered a smile. "Thank you, we tried to honor him." The woman nodded slowly. "I knew Matteo once, when he was just a boy helping his mother carry bread to the corner market." Elena blinked in surprise. "You knew him?" "I knew his kindness," the woman said, "and his pain. I'm glad someone finally gave his memory a place to rest." Her words carved a soft ache in Elena's heart, a reminder that Matteo's life stretched far beyond the walls he once cooked within. Before Elena could respond, Marina came bouncing back, tugging at her sleeve. "Mom, Mrs. Hall from the shelter says thank you for the blankets, and she loves the cinnamon rolls." Elena kissed her daughter's forehead. "Tell her I'll bring more next week." Marina darted off again. The elderly woman smiled. "You have a good heart. Use it wisely. Crowds can praise, but shadows always listen." Before Elena could ask what she meant, the woman slipped into the crowd and disappeared between tables, leaving only the faint scent of lavender in her wake. Elena stood still for a moment, a chill brushing along her spine. Shadows always listen. The words echoed quietly, layering unease beneath the warmth of the room. She exhaled slowly, pushing the tension aside. For now, she needed to stay present, needed to breathe. Across the room, Lorenzo waved her over with a small grin. He stood by the new kitchen pass, helping a young chef assemble plates. "You're doing it again," he said when she reached him, raising an amused brow. Doing what? Watching over everyone like a guardian angel with a clipboard. She laughed softly. I'm just making sure everything flows. Lorenzo tilted his head, studying her as if seeing beneath her words. Elena, you don't have to shoulder everything alone anymore. You've got people now. She glanced at the bustling staff people she'd hired from shelters, recovery homes, and community programs. People rebuilding their lives alongside her. You're right, she whispered, but I'm still learning how to let go. Lorenzo touched her arm lightly, a comforting, grounding gesture. We'll figure it out. Together. She nodded, that single word together settling deep in her chest, warm and steady. A dish clattered behind them, followed by laughter. The kitchen buzzed with energy. Elena could almost feel Matteo's presence threading through the air, smiling through every burst of flavor and every shared moment. Yet even in that warmth, something tugged at the edge of Elena's awareness. A shift, a ripple, a subtle tension. She turned toward the entry doors. A man stood there, not part of the crowd, not smiling, not clapping. He was alone, silent, watching, a long coat, a hat pulled low, his posture straight, controlled, unmoving. Elena's breath caught. Lorenzo followed her gaze, then his jaw tightened. Elena, he murmured carefully, stay behind me. Her heart hammered. Is it? No, Lorenzo whispered quickly, eyes narrowing. Not Darian, but not someone we know. The stranger remained still, observing the room like a man scanning a battlefield. Lorenzo approached him slowly. Can I help you? He asked. The man's head tilted slightly. I'm looking for the owner. Lorenzo's shoulders tensed. And who might you be? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted a worn leather satchel and placed it gently on a nearby table. Then he looked directly at Elena. I came, he said softly, because I was told Matteo Vasari left something for me. Elena froze. A whisper of cold air slipped down her spine. Lorenzo moved closer to the man, jaw clenched. Who told you that? A mutual friend, the stranger replied. Initial A. Elena's breath unspooled, slow, sharp, trembling. The journalist, the one Matteo trusted, the one Lorenzo said they needed to find. Elena, the man said, lowering his hat, revealing steady, intelligent eyes. My name is Adrian Wells. Matteo sent word before he died, told me that if anything ever happened to him, someone else would carry the truth forward. The restaurant's noise seemed to dull around her. Lorenzo stepped back, shock flickering through his expression. You're real. Adrian offered a thin, solemn smile. I'm more persistent than real. Elena approached, her steps heavy with disbelief. How did you find us? He glanced around the room at the families, the warmth, the tribute wall. Matteo's name travels far, and when a destroyed restaurant suddenly reopens, rebuilt by a woman who survived things the public can't even imagine, you follow the threads. Elena swallowed hard. What do you want? Adrian reached into his satchel and placed a small recorder on the table. Your story, he said softly, and Matteo's truth. Lorenzo exchanged a wary look with Elena. She hesitated. This isn't just a story. It's dangerous. People have died, which means it must be told. Adrian replied calmly. Matteo believed the same, and after seeing what you fought for, I believe it too. Elena's throat tightened. This moment, this tiny crack in the new floor of her life, felt like destiny circling back. Not to haunt her, but to finish what desperation had begun. Adrian leaned in. If you're willing, I can help expose everything, the syndicate, their corruption, the officials protecting them, all of it. Lorenzo exhaled slowly. He's offering exactly what Matteo wanted, and exactly what Darian will kill for, Elena whispered. Adrian's expression didn't flinch. That's why we must do it together. Elena looked to Marina, laughing now with volunteers near the pastry counter, spinning with innocence untouched by the world's sharp edges. And she looked at the bustling room, built from the ashes of fear, lit from within by hope, filled with people who believed in change. She inhaled, slow, steady, Certain, we'll talk, she said softly. After closing, Adrian nodded once. I'll wait. As she returned to the center of the restaurant, Lorenzo by her side, Elena felt the future shift, subtle but undeniable. The restaurant was alive. Hope was alive, but the truth Matteo died for was knocking at her door, and the story was only beginning. Night settled softly over the newly reborn restaurant, casting warm amber light across its windows as the final guests drifted out into the calm, star-speckled dark. The clink of dishes faded. The hum of conversation dimmed. For the first time since morning, silence began to gently settle into the space. Elena stood near the counter, one hand resting on the polished wood, the other smoothing the last wrinkle from her apron. Marina leaned sleepily against her hip, fighting the weight of her eyelids, her small fingers tangled in the fabric of Elena's shirt. It had been a full day, fuller than Elena ever could have imagined. A day of laughter, tears, second chances. A day that reminded her how far she had come from the frightened mother with only $100 in her pocket. Now, the restaurant breathed around her like an old soul finally at peace. Lorenzo finished wiping down the final table and joined her, resting his arm lightly on the counter. His voice was warm, hushed. It was a good opening. Elena smiled softly. Better than good. Her gaze swept across the room, the glowing lanterns, the clean floors, Matteo's framed letters catching the last glow of evening. Every detail felt sacred now, stitched with memories of the man whose truth had been buried beneath those floorboards for decades. Lorenzo looked toward the back corner, where Adrian Wells waited patiently at a small table, his recorder tucked neatly beside a half-finished cup of tea. He sat with the stillness of someone who understood the weight of waiting for truth. "You ready for this?" Lorenzo asked. Elena inhaled slowly, her breath quivering. "I don't know if anyone is ever ready, but it's time." She set Marina gently into a booth with a blanket, kissing her forehead as the little girl curled instantly into dreams. Elena lingered a moment, her fingers brushing loose strands of hair, her heart holding tight to the innocence she wanted to protect more than anything. Then she turned toward the table where Adrian waited. He stood when she approached, offering a respectful nod. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know what this means." Elena sat across from him. Lorenzo took the seat beside her, his posture vigilant, protective, a silent reminder she wasn't facing this alone. Adrian opened his notebook. "I'm here only to listen. You'll decide what happens next." His voice was gentle, but steady, the voice of someone who had spent years unearthing stories no one wanted unearthed. Elena exhaled, her fingers tracing the edge of the steel recorder. "Where do we begin?" "Wherever feels true," Adrian said. "The rest will follow." She closed her eyes, and in that single breath, the weight of everything returned to her. The auction, the abandoned restaurant, the hollow floorboards, Matteo's coded notebook, the chamber beneath the floors, the fire, Darian's voice rising from the flames like a curse. Elena's throat tightened, but she forced the memories into words. She spoke slowly at first, each sentence trembling like a newborn step. But soon her voice steadied, gathering strength, weaving through the timeline of her nightmare and her miracle with a clarity she hadn't felt until now. Adrian listened without interrupting. Lorenzo watched over her with quiet intensity. Marina slept peacefully a few feet away. Hours passed in the hush of truth. When Elena finally paused, her voice was hoarse, her eyes misted, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Adrian leaned back in his chair, scribbling the final note, then closing his notebook with careful reverence. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "this isn't just a story, it's a reckoning." She nodded, exhausted. "And it's not finished." "No," Adrian agreed, "but it can begin here." Lorenzo's gaze drifted toward the darkened windows. "They'll come after us once this goes public." Adrian didn't deny it. "Then we'll be ready. I'll take precautions." This won't be published overnight, it'll be built layer by layer until there's no way to silence it. Elena's chest eased not with relief, but with acceptance. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Only this?" Adrian replied softly. "The binder, the evidence Matteo gathered. When you're ready, I'll take it." Elena hesitated, her eyes drifting to the steel box resting on a shelf behind the counter. "It's not just evidence," she whispered. "It's a life's worth of regret and hope. And you've honored both," Adrian said gently, "but the rest of the world needs to see it too." Elena nodded. She stood, walking slowly to the shelf. She lifted the steel box carefully, its weight familiar now, heavy with stories that had shaped her fate. For a long moment, she held it against her chest, feeling Matteo's echoes beneath her fingertips. Then she returned to the table. "Take it," she said. Lorenzo's breath hitched. He wasn't expecting her to give it away so soon, but he didn't stop her. Adrian accepted the box with both hands, a look of deep respect in his eyes. "Elena, you've done something extraordinary," he said. "You chose truth." "No," she whispered. "I chose my daughter's future." He nodded, understanding every layer of her words. They rose from the table. Elena walked him to the door, watched him step outside into the quiet night, clutching the steel box like a fragile soul's last chance. The door closed softly behind him. Elena turned to face her restaurant, glowing, peaceful, safe. For the first time, she felt the world exhale with her. There was still danger, there were still shadows, there was still Darien, somewhere out there in the dark, but tonight, for this one quiet moment, hope stood stronger than fear. She walked back to Marina, brushing a kiss across her daughter's forehead. And as lantern light shimmered across the warm wooden floors, Elena whispered to herself a promise forged from everything she had lost and everything she had rebuilt. The story is only beginning. Long after Adrian disappeared into the night with Matteo's steel box tucked beneath his arm, Elena remained standing inside the restaurant, wrapped in a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. The lanterns glowed softly above her, casting warm circles of light across the empty tables, the same tables that had been filled with laughter only hours earlier. Lorenzo moved quietly through the room, collecting stray napkins, resetting chairs, wiping down surfaces, as though the rhythm helped him stay grounded. Marina slept peacefully in the corner booth, her small body curled beneath a blanket, her hair spilling over the cushion like liquid gold. Elena approached the tribute wall, Matteo's wall, and let her fingers drift lightly along the frame of his photograph. His eyes seemed alive in the dim light, caught in that eternal moment of gentle laughter. "You did this," she whispered softly, "all of it." Lorenzo joined her, leaning one shoulder against the wall as he looked up at his brother's picture. His voice cracked with emotion he didn't bother hiding. "He'd be proud of you." Elena met his gaze. "Of us?" "No," Lorenzo said quietly, shaking his head. "He chose you. Of all the people who could have walked into this building, of all the people who could have ignored the strange floorboards and the broken history, he trusted you without even knowing you." Elena took a slow breath. "And you trusted me too." He paused, eyes softening. "Maybe I needed someone to believe in as much as you needed something to hope for." A silence settled between them, comfortable, warm, threaded with the understanding forged only through fire and survival. Outside, the streetlights flickered gently. A calm breeze swept past the windows, carrying the distant hum of cars and the quiet pulse of a city beginning to rest. The world hadn't changed overnight, but her world had. Elena returned to the center of the restaurant, turning in a slow circle as though seeing it for the first time, the polished tables, the warm lantern light, the flowers in Matteo's corner, the soft notes of leftover music humming from the speakers. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a promise, a sanctuary, A legacy, Lorenzo, she said quietly. What happens now after tonight? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Now, we rebuild, slowly, carefully. Adrian will work in the shadows. We keep this place alive, keep helping people, and when the truth finally breaks free, when the story is ready to surface. He glanced toward the door. We face whatever comes. She studied him, the bruises faded, the fear lingering in the edges of his eyes, but something new there too, a resolve, a peace, a future. What about Darian? Elena whispered. Lorenzo's jaw tensed. He'll surface again. Men like him always do, but not tonight. He's injured, angry, running out of places to hide. And if he comes here, Lorenzo stepped closer, voice low and steady. Then he'll learn the same thing Fire learned: you don't fall easily. She laughed softly, surprising herself. It wasn't the bitter laugh she'd carried for months. It was lighter, stronger. The clock above the counter ticked quietly, its hands sliding toward midnight. Elena, Lorenzo murmured, you should rest. Marina's out cold. She shook her head. Not yet. There's something I want to do. She crossed the room and knelt beside a loose plank near the kitchen doorway. She had left this one untouched during the rebuild, a small imperfection she'd been saving for tonight. She pried it open gently. A small hollow space waited beneath the floor. Lorenzo frowned. What are you doing? Elena pulled a folded piece of paper from her apron, worn slightly from her touch, soft at the edges. She flattened it in her palm. I kept this from the first night, she whispered, when I realized everything was about to change. It was her own handwriting. A list of hopes she scribbled in a moment of desperation, dreams she barely believed in back then. A safe home for Marina, enough money for food, a job that doesn't break me, a life that isn't just surviving. She smiled faintly. Matteo left a message for whoever came next, she said. It seems right that I do the same. She placed the note in the hollow, smoothing it gently. For the next lost soul who finds their way in here, she whispered. A reminder that broken beginnings can lead to beautiful places. Lorenzo knelt beside her, touched by the quiet reverence of the moment. She lowered the floorboard back into place and pressed it down until it clicked softly into the wood. A time capsule of hope, a whisper to the future, a final echo of everything this journey had given her. Elena stood, brushing the dust from her hands. Lorenzo rose too, watching her silently. You're not the same woman who bought this place for $100, he said softly. No, she whispered, I'm not, and that's a good thing. She looked around the glowing room one last time before heading toward Marina, lifting her gently into her arms. Lorenzo opened the front door, holding it for her. Cool night air swept inside, carrying the scent of damp pavement and early spring. Elena paused at the threshold. The ruined restaurant that once hid $90 million had become something far more powerful. A beacon. A refuge, a second chance for everyone who stepped inside. As she carried Marina into the quiet street, she turned back one last time, her eyes soft, her heart steady. Good night, Matteo, she whispered, and as the lanterns inside flickered softer, settling into their late night glow, Elena felt the final truth settle into her soul. This wasn't an ending. This wasn't closure. This wasn't goodbye. It was the legacy beneath the floorboards, a reminder that courage rises where fear once lived. And the story was only beginning.